Jason, let us know what you've been doing this summer and tell us about yourself.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of the Wild Ones organization, and just it's an honor to be here. I have to admit, I normally don't do these kind of things. I'm one of those people who are just much more comfortable out on the trails, leading a hike, showing people actually in person in the Cedar Glades. But I really can't pass up any opportunity to talk about the Cedar Glades. It's something that's really passionate about that. We're lucky in Tennessee to have such a variety of habitats here in Tennessee. And somehow the Cedar Glades, that's become my passion. I think I grew up around Percy Priest Lake. I had a little bit of cedar glade habitat in the woods behind our house. We had some cedar trees. I remember as a kid, we had a lot of bare limestone back there. And I didn't really know what it was, of course. And the one thing I do remember in the ditch out by our road, we had all we knew it, my dad just called it phlox, but looking back on it, I'm pretty sure that was a glade phlox because it was a rocky ditch back in there. But so many things I wish I could go back and figure out what they were. But I knew it was something different and kind of unique, and it's kind of stayed with me. Now when I go out to these Cedar Glades, it just feels like home. There's a connection when I go back there. So as I go through this slideshow, a lot of these are from the Long Hunter State Park area. Couchfield Glade, we have some other trails that have a lot of Cedar Glade habitat, Jones Mill, Bryant Grove. And there are a few interspersed. There are a few other glades in there, a couple from Flat Rock and Vesta, maybe Cedars of Letterman that has maybe a few species I don't see at Long Hunter. I wanted to add some of the rare species that we don't get over there at Long Hunter State Park. As I go through these, one thing I guess I'd like to mention is probably when I just come from when I'm out in the Cedar Glades, a lot of this stuff is pretty much self-taught because I was just passionate about. I don't really have, you probably won't hear a lot of really technical descriptions. I'm not a botanist, at least I'm not a professional botanist, not a biologist. In fact, I was very bad at biology in school. My chemistry class in college, I had to drop out because I didn't know what anybody was talking about. So I'm coming from this kind of more at an emotional level when I'm talking about the Cedar Glades. It's something I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the Cedar Glades. I'm passionate about them. Like I said, I feel a connection to them. So I may not can give you all the technical, all of the scientific names for some of these plants I'm talking about. But I feel like I spent a lot of time in the Cedar Glades. I kind of know where things grow, when they grow. I kind of have a feel for what's out there. A lot of the tendencies, some of the plants and the animals have. I feel like I have a good feel for it, and that's in a way is more important to me than anything. And so as I go through here, like I said, I'll try to throw little tidbits out on some of these. I'm not going to get, again, limited time. I'm not going to get too deep on any particular photo or species, but I'm trying to give you just kind of a broad overview. But like if I was taking you out, I had a 1 hour tour just to give you an overview of the Cedar Glades. I guess the first thing when I have people out in the Cedar Glades, there are a lot of people who've never even heard of a Cedar Glade. What is a Cedar Glade? I get them out there, whether it's Couchville. I always have kind of called it for some reason another description, sort of like our version of I call it like the Tennessee desert, like our version of the desert. And because we do have some species that are like desert, like the prickly pear, and have some of the succulent leaves. This slide here, well, actually, it's a lot smaller than it was on my screen at home. But this is I got this actually from the MTSU study for the Cedar Glades. I really like their description as far as what a Cedar Glade is. That's probably too small for you to see, but I can read it. This is just there's a lot of, I think if you ask 10 people, what is a Cedar Glade, you'll get 10 different answers. But I think in general, this kind of covers a broad basis. MTSU study for the Cedar Glades. It says limestone Cedar Glades are endangered ecosystems found primarily in the central basin of Middle Tennessee. Much of this extremely fragile system has been destroyed or severely damaged by humans. Glades have been viewed historically as wastelands, yet they support plant communities of highly specialized species, some of which are found nowhere else in the world. The soluble limestone rock forms the karst topography of the glades, which includes sinkholes on the surface and subterranean water. An underlying cave network that is home to many extraordinary cave organisms is also beneath the glades. Cedar glades are characterized by very thin soil and exposed rocky patches surrounded by red cedar trees. In the forested southeastern United States, the glade environment is seasonally contrasting from standing water in the winter due to poor drainage to hot and dry in the summer. But I kind of like their description. It's kind of a good broad overview of what Cedar Glade is. You know, when people, the thing about Cedar Glades that's always fascinated me is, you know, they used to be considered like wastelands. People use them as dumps historically. Still to this day, if you go to any of these state protected Cedar Glades, you'll find debris going back, no telling how long, farm equipment, rust, all kind of rusted equipment. You don't, some other things I found, I don't even know what they are. I found, you'll find a lot of glass. All of the glades have just glass. We even did cleanups over the years and got rid of all of this glass, but it just keeps coming back. There's so much, you can't get rid of all of it. So we kind of use it as a teaching tool, really. Like, this is what glades used to be thought of. They used to be considered dumps, wasteland. But then I always think, okay, why now, you know, what turned the corner from them being considered wastelands? Now they're like these prized, these places where botanists come from all over the Southeast, all over the country, you know, to see this wildflower wonderland. What changed? And the person here in this photo, Augustin Gattinger, he was a German botanist and physician. He came over to Tennessee, probably the mid 1800s, 1850s. And he was, there's no way to know, he was the first one to talk about and describe these species, but he was the one historically, all the research I've done, who was really, we got out there, made these species known, we got out in the Cedar Glades. And then many years later, this actually is from his publication in 1901, The Flora of Tennessee, where he described a lot of these Cedar Glade species. He described the habitat of the species, plants nobody had ever even, you know, heard of before. And I'm sure most of these names have changed since the days that he was out there in the glades. So I almost call him sort of, when I think of the Cedar Glades, I call him sort of like, I don't know, the grandfather of the Cedar Glades. That's sort of when I think of Augustin Gattinger. And then after him, I think the next phase that took Cedar Glades maybe to another level, Elsie Quarterman, she was a Vanderbilt biology professor. And this photo, I think, is from 1947, maybe. I could be wrong, but I know it's in the 40s. And that's her actually out in a Cedar Glade, exploring a Cedar Glade in the 1940s. And I just love that photo. I almost wish I could just snap my finger and be right there with her, and like just seeing what she's seeing, and going on a hike with her, and seeing these extraordinary species that long ago in the 40s. And I know over the years she was fascinated by the Cedar Glade. That was her main, you know, interest while she was a professor. She took a lot of students out there, and her students, they become really important as far as Cedar Glade studies as well. But she was really passionate about it. And I think one of the things that really turned the corner, when she'd already made so many strides as far as the Cedar Glades notoriety, but the Tennessee coneflower, a lot of you've probably heard of that one, which might be probably the most famous wildflower of the Cedar Glades, if not our most famous wildflower in Tennessee all the way around. But they were believed to be extinct for a long time. I think through the 40s, 50s, 60s, they had not. I think Augustin Gattinger, I think he's the one that first discovered them back along, I think maybe in the Laverne area, I believe, is when he first found Tennessee coneflower. But then they were believed to be extinct for a long, long time. And I think around 1968, Elsie Quarterman and one of our students were out at a glade near Long Hunter. It's now called Mount View State Natural Area. It's just a little glade in the middle of a subdivision. You wouldn't think like much, it's just a tiny little, like a little, maybe barely a quarter-mile trail. But I think her and a student in 68, that's when they first found, rediscovered the Tennessee coneflower. And that was a pretty big thing. And I think, when was it? About 1979, a few years later, it became the first Tennessee wildflower to be on the federal endangered list. And that's when things really started happening. I mean, as far as the Cedar Glades, people became aware not only of the coneflower, they were going out to these glades, finding other unique species, rare species, and it became a thing where the state was actually, and other organizations, environmental organizations, were protecting some of these Cedar Glades. So yeah, Elsie Quarterman, her impact on Cedar Glades, it can't be really overstated. She just did so many amazing things. And up until what, a few years ago, I remember 104 years old. She was still over there at the Cedar Glade Wildflower Festival. She was just amazing. Her her energy and her passion. She just never stopped. But one thing that I learned reading her studies, Elsie Quarterman, and I always like to use this picture here. This was the first picture actually you saw. This is Couchville Cedar Glade. Elsie Quarterman came up with the idea that there are 6 different zones of a cedar glade. And this is one of my favorite spots at Couchville Cedar Glade. I try to, when I lead a hike out there, try to take people out to this spot if I can. You can stand really in that spot and pretty much see all 6 zones of a cedar glade that Elsie Quarterman initially describes. Does this have a pointer, Richard? Oh, there we go. So zone 1 basically is just, well, change photos there. Zone 1 is basically just the bare limestone. So you got a lot of that there. And I love this spot here because there's just these big open slabs of just the bare limestone, which that makes me think Cedar Glade when I see that photo. But zone 1 was just the bare limestone. And then zone 2 was actually what she called the gravelly glades. That would be right through here where it becomes a little bit of soil, maybe, an inch, 2 inches, maybe less, very thin, rocky soil. A lot of the rare species grow and bloom right here in that zone 2, those gravelly glades right there. This is before a lot of things. Well, I can almost think of so many of our rare species just in waves throughout the spring and summer will grow and bloom right in that zone 2. And then zone 3, she called the grassy glades. And you can kind of go out here, some of these grassy areas. It's funny, different parts of the different regions call them, some people call them barrens, some people call them prairies. Limestone, the limestone barrens, I've heard that description. But yes, she calls zone 3 the grassy glades. And a lot of species grow out here too. A lot of the wildflowers in this zone, and the grassy glades sort of behind here. Again, each zone gets a little bit thicker soil. We're getting into zone 3, you got the grassy areas, a little bit thicker, richer soil to get a little bit more species. Zone 4, she called the shrub zone, which right along here, you would get things like St. John's wort, like the Gilded St. John's wort. You get like some coralberry. You would get, there's some glade privet in there, which is actually one of our native privets. You would get fragrant sumac. Again, you're getting into some deeper soil there, so you're getting a few more. You get some bigger plants, some shrubs, and then zone 5, she would call. I think she described it as like kind of the cedar woods. Right behind the shrubs, you start seeing you get a little bit deeper soil. You're getting some cedar trees over there, the eastern red cedar. I see a blue ash. There's a blue ash tree over there. We got a winged elm tree. And to be honest, in that thin, rocky soil, that's pretty much going to be your main species out in the glade is going to be eastern red cedar, blue ash, winged elm. You might get a few more random things. You'll get some hackberry sometimes in that area. And some of the cedar glades like chinkapin oak, you'll see some post oak, some plants, some trees that do well in kind of those sandy, poor soils, the limestones. But zone 5 there, the cedar woods. And then zone 6, ultimately you get back to the rich soil, the thicker soil. That's where you get kind of the oak hickory forest, way back behind the cedar trees. So I just love that spot because, like I said, you can kind of see everything she was describing as far as the 6 zones of a cedar glade. Here, basically in this portion, I'm just kind of going through the seasons. This is actually starting in January, pretty much this photo. Actually, some of the little, actually some of the plants there are actually Tennessee coneflowers. You see like the seed heads there. You can kind of see that's kind of how they look in January. Still a lot of the seed heads on the Tennessee coneflowers. But even in January, you get color. That's why I love the cedar glades. You still get some color. Even in kind of the dark brown, kind of gray, kind of the dreary winter months. There's our native cactus, the eastern prickly pear, covered up in some snow and some ice on the spines there. Little reindeer lichen with the snow on it. All these are pretty much January, just to give you some January scenes of a glade and how it kind of progresses throughout the winter and spring. This is actually one of our wildflowers just in the January phase. That's actually the reddish and the green there. That's Leavenworthia stylosa. That's long style glade crest. Kind of what it looks like in the wintertime in January. But it has some, again, some of these have some nice color, even in January, little tints of like the red and green. Smalls ragwort is a species we have out in the glade, and that's, again, some nice color in January. And I love the red and greens of the prickly pear in January. Like I said, I'm amazed that in January you can go out on a cold January day and see so much color. But the glades are really, I always consider them kind of a place for all seasons. There's something unique about it every month of the year, pretty much. Tennessee coneflower, just some of the seed heads in January. A good close-up look at some of those. Just some more of the greens. There again, that's a January scene. All kind of mosses. You got the lichens, you got the prickly pears, you got ferns going on. And some of the moss, they get just really bright, just green. I mean, in January, it's kind of reassuring to go out there and see all that greenery. And there's, I mentioned some of the trees. That's just a post oak out there in January, out in kind of the limestone prairie, the little barrens area. They tend to keep their leaves, I think, longer than pretty much any of the trees I see out in the glades, the post oaks. And just some more color, some more January color. Again, you're getting there's your typical like cedar tree stump there with some rocks and some of the lichens and mosses and nice little bit of January color. And you can see some of the grasses. There's a lot of the blue stems and some of the other grasses that they're providing some color in the wintertime. And again, out there, some more, I think most of those trees I'm seeing there is a red cedar and the wing down. That is some more of the Leavenworthia stylosa, the long style glade crest, the little foliage you see around some nostoc. Some people call that witch's butter. I've heard it called star jelly. Trust me, it doesn't taste too good. I tried it. It's kind of bland. It's edible, but it's kind of bland. It doesn't taste bad. It's just it tastes about what it looks like, pretty much. But yeah, I like it. It's funny because when it's really dry, it looks like just kind of black and crusty. You would think it would turn it. I think that's why some of the farmers back then nicknamed it star jelly, because they would see it black and crusty. Then when we get a lot of rain, all of a sudden it would plump up and look like that, and they thought it was something just falling from the stars or something. But so there's your Leavenworthia there. And this is a January photo, and I'm going to go to the next. I think the next slide is also January. That's January. I took that one on January the 13th. And when I said, the glades are a place pretty much for all seasons, most years I see wildflowers from January through December, which is that kind of still kind of amazes me, at least in the Cedar Glades, at least they're around Long Hunter. And this is the first usually wildflower that blooms in the Cedar Glades every year. Leavenworthia stylosa, it's long style glade crest, which is a pretty rare species. Not so rare at Couchfield because there's a lot of it there, but overall it's considered a pretty rare species. And also, well, I think the earliest I've ever found one, I think one year I found one actually on January the 3rd. So that's pretty amazing. They come in 3 different colors. That's a white one. And I think the very same day, I think this is right beside it, there was kind of a violet sort of pinkish one. Same species, just a different color. They also come in yellow. So there are 3 different colors. These are January photos. And I think here I go to like to February. Here we are in February, get a little bit more blooms. You're seeing all 3 colors here now of the long style glade crest, the Leavenworthia stylosa. You're getting the white, you're getting kind of the pinkish, lavenderish, you're getting the yellow. And I've kind of noticed they kind of, depending on the region you're in as far as the colors. I know at Long Hunter we get more of the white. I think I've been places like at Cedars of Lebanon where they get a lot more of the yellow. We get some yellow at Long Hunter, but not a lot. So we're getting into February, get a little bit more blooms there. And I think I got one more photo, February. That's just a different spot in Couchfield Glade. Very vibrant pink photo there, pink glade crest and some white. But again, and they bloom. They start in January. They're going to get good February, March. You'll still see them in April. I've even seen a few in May. So they have, unlike some of the glade species, there are some that bloom for a week or 2 and they're gone. You got to get up there and see them or you'll miss them. The glade crest is one. If you miss it in January and February, you can probably see it in March and April. So it'll be around for a while. But it's in the mustard family. I probably failed to mention that, Leavenworthia stylosa. And that was just one up close. That's an old photo. Like I said, back when I was actually taking small resolution, that's why it's so small. That's a pretty old photo. But I just wanted to see up close. It's a beautiful flower. They're very small. That's about the size of maybe a nickel, between a dime and a nickel as far as the size. They're small flowers, but they're very beautiful, very beautiful. This is another Leavenworthia. This is actually Leavenworthia uniflora, which is also the common name would be small glade cress. We don't have a lot of that at Long Hunter. In fact, I've seen very little. I'll see a few every year. Just usually they're right in the middle, kind of the rocky trail. Now, even though this was not considered a rare one like the other one at Long Hunter, this one's actually more rare than the long style glade cress because I don't see much of this one. This one's very small, not as showy. This one's tiny. This is maybe the size of a raisin, if that big, maybe. So not as showy, much smaller. Similar habitats, but I find these like somehow kind of in the rocky dirt trails sometimes, right in the middle of the trails where I see these. These are all February. We're getting into March now. This is one of the phlox. This is the glade phlox, which is another species considered a rare species. You can kind of see that habitat there. You can see the cedar tree, kind of the rocky terrain. And you can kind of see the different tints of the color too. I mean, a lot of these I see are like pure white. Then I see others are kind of like bluish or purplish. But really nice. We see these in ditches a lot. Sometimes if you're in rocky glade habitats, you go on. The most I've ever seen was just driving down near Catchford Glade, just the side of the road, just in the ditches. That's just thick in the ditches sometimes. You wouldn't think it's a rare species when you drive by that time of year when they're peak, but yeah, it does well in those ditches, those rocky ditches. This was about the same time. These is some more March species. Glade violet, also known as Eggleston's violet. And again, these glade species just amaze me. I mean, you just look at it, it's just like rock everywhere. And then you got this beautiful plant growing right out in the middle, right up the middle of this rock. Don't see a lot of these, at least I don't, over in Couchville, Long Hunter, just kind of scattered here and there. Actually, this was taken at the Jones Mill Trail of Long Hunter State Park. Actually see more of those. I don't actually rarely ever see this species at Couchville Cedar Glade. I have to go over to the other side of the park, the Bryant Grove, the Jones Mill area. That's where I see more of these. Yeah, this is the Carolina anemone that I think I discovered these for the first time. I'd never seen them at Long Hunter or Couchville. And I got in touch with Todd Crabtree, and he said it had never been ID'd there before, never been found there before. So this is a somewhat rare species. It's not much of it around. This is sort of a grassy area, well, sort of a mixed rocky area, grassy area. This is a kind of off the beaten path area of Couchville Cedar Glade. But I found a few of these blooming every March now. And I love underneath, it's beautiful. It's a small flower. From the top, I didn't get a shot from the top. It's just pure white, but I love underneath the petals, have some really nice color to them. Yeah, Carolina anemone. That's just some early saxifrage. Now this one's not as rare as some of these other ones I've shown, but it's a nice little blooms. One of the first blooms I see over in Couchford Glade every year, kind of after the Leavenworthia bloom. This is usually about the next one I see blooming, usually kind of at the edge of the woods there in the rocky areas. If you look all around, you'll see all kind of things going on there. You'll see some ferns. I think that's hairy lip fern. I see some sedum, some of the glade stonecrop getting ready, coming out. A lot of mosses. But I love that. I just love that little flower. It's always there in the little rocky area on the edge of the woods beside the glade. Hoary Puccoon, one we'll see kind of sometimes the grassy glades, sometimes in the rocky glades. Puccoon, that's kind of sort of means like a yellow dye flower. I think Native Americans use that for a yellow dye. I like this one because just, again, that's my idea when I think of a cedar glade. I mean, you got the bare limestone, you got the Leavenworthia stylosa, the long style glade cress, and you got the prickly pear cactus, you got some moss. I don't often see those kind of in the same little spot together. So I'm always fascinated when I see some things like that. That really thinks that's really my idea of like a cedar glade when I see something like that. Oh, the adder's tongue fern. That's again, these are March or April. We're getting into April now. That's one of the ferns that I find a lot out in the cedar glades. This is a Couchville scene, but I think pretty much all that you're seeing behind there, that shows you how thick it was there. That's all adder's tongue fern back there, I believe, in that shot. And you can see it's pretty kind of a lot of dirt, rocky. It's not not your typical fern. Most of the ferns I see in the glades, they're at the edge of the woods with the other you know, some of the mosses, but there's right out in the middle of the dirt, rocky areas. Glade Phacelia, another March, April bloom. Um, don't see a lot of that there, Couchfield Long Hunter, but I saw more than I've ever seen this year for whatever reason. That's one I tend to see kind of at the edges of, sort of like the edges of the woods. They're kind of where the rocky area kind of meets the woods. It's usually they're right on those edges there, the Glade Phacelia. And I got another photo, I think of it. This is a kind of a different little area of, kind of a grassy area. You know, that's all Glade Phacelia. So that's just rare. I rarely ever see it that thick, but that's just one particular spot I found one year, where it was blooming in this grassy area. And, oh, and there's one more, that's a Glade Phacelia as well. I just love that little spot there. Again, there's some bare limestone at Couchfield Glade, some of the glade mosses. I think there's some other stuff, some sedums coming up, just that one little Glade Phacelia poking through. It just, again, things like that just amaze me. That's, I just wonder how plants so not only live in that habitat, but actually thrive. But just seeing a scene like that just always amazes me. This is, let's see, that's a little glade sandwort. That's one is not as rare again as some of the others I've shown, but again, I just love seeing where it blooms there in the middle of that rock there, coming little cracks in the rock. That's a very tiny flower, the glade sandwort. It's, yeah, it's probably not even as big as a raisin. It's a very small flower. The yellow stargrass, this is getting more, I think, April here. You can see, again, this is most of these, that's a common thing. You'll see a lot of rocks. You'll see gravelly or rocks, bare limestone, yellow stargrass there. And then one very similar, it's the white blue-eyed grass there out in the grassy glades. I tend to see that a lot. We do a lot of prescribed burns out there in all of the Long Hunter and many of the glades and barrens, but year after they have the prescribed burns, it seems like this species just kind of goes crazy. The next year I'll just see tons of this. Just a little bit later, April, showing you some of the long style glade crest, which I talked about earlier, just where it's getting a little bit thicker, seeing more of it. All white, looks like the all white glade crest there. And there at the same time, some of the early glade crest that bloomed in January, February is going to seed. That's the same flower we just saw, long style glade crest there in the gravel, going to seed. This astragalus, that's Tennessee milk vetch, one of our, it's a pretty rare species. You can see there, I see that kind of a lot where the kind of the gravelly glades kind of meets the grassy glades. I love seeing just the little fine differences in where some of these things grow. Some just, you know, that's where I usually find that. It's usually that same little habitat, right where kind of the gravel meets kind of the grassy areas. I love the color of these. It's a very, that cream color. I don't see that color very often in the glades, kind of the hairy leaves. And I think that's a little, maybe an adder's tongue fern beside it there. But this is getting about mid-April, seeing the Tennessee milk vetch, the astragalus. Another one in the same family. This is Pines ground plum, very rare species. I think it's a federally listed species. You can find that probably at Flat Rock. And it's been reintroduced in 2 or 3 other glades. They're trying to get it established. But again, that's a close cousin of the one we just saw, Tennessee milk vetch, Pines ground plum. Just a little violet wood sorrel there in the rocky glades there. Not a rare species, but I see it sometimes there on the edges of the glades and the rocky areas. And another wood sorrel, this next one is one I see actually more in the Cedar glades, which is Price's wood sorrel. This is a little bit bigger flower than, we have a common yellow wood sorrel, which I see a lot. And this one's usually more in the glades. Also, you see the red inside, the reddish color inside the Price's wood sorrel. And this is another one, like strangely like the Eggleston's violet. I really don't see this one at Couchfield, but I go over in Jones Mill and the Bryant Grove side of Long Hunter, and I see this one. In fact, I see a lot of it there. So there are some species, it's kind of strange that I'll find on one side of Long Hunter, but in the glades, but go to the other side of Long Hunter, the other glades, and it won't be there. So there are a few things in other parts of Long Hunter, the glades of Long Hunter that we have that I don't find at Couchfield. And like Price's wood sorrel and Eggleston's violet or two, I rarely see at Couchfield. One of my favorites right here is Nashville breadroot. I just love seeing, it just amazes me seeing something, you know, that vibrant and deep purple out there in the middle of all that rock there. I photographed this on the Jones Mill Trail at Long Hunter State Park. Again, this was probably middle of April. This is one you have to catch pretty quickly. It just doesn't bloom for long. It's usually maybe a couple of weeks and they're pretty much gone. That's another one. I think it was kind of just backlit by the sun there. I don't think I've ever seen another plant out in the Cedar Glades that attracts bumblebees like this plant. When these are in their full bloom, I go out in there, and sometimes I'll find some breadroot bloom, and I'll just sit there on a sunny day, and you just hear a constant buzz. I mean, you just watch the bees. There's everywhere, just a constant buzz. You can photograph them. You can almost touch them. They're not even paying you any attention. They're so focused on these flowers. But yeah, I don't think I can think of another plant that the bees love more than the actual breadroot. And that's just another view, see how they're kind of sporadically out there in the gravelly glades. That's kind of during their peak where you can see quite a bit of them scattered around. The evening primrose, this is the triloba. This is the three-lobed evening primrose, which is the one we usually see over at Long Hunter. And that's some glazed sandwort there behind it. That's sort of a rocky ditch right there. You can see, again, species that tend to overlap. You can see some sedum in there coming up around that. I think the next photo, maybe, let's see. Okay, no, we'll get to another primrose here in a minute. That's false garlic, not a rare species, but quite common in April out in the Cedar Glades. This is one that we didn't see much of until recent years, at least over at Long Hunter and Couchfield. This is Western Wallflower. And I think last time I checked, it was only found in maybe 4 counties, maybe 4 or 5 counties in Tennessee. And in fact, it's not even listed. It's still not even listed for Davidson County, but that's Davidson County. That's Couchfield Cedar Glade. And I've noticed with the burns in recent years, it's kind of slowly spreading. We're getting more and more of it. I've actually found it now in like 3 or 4 different spots around Long Hunter. And you don't really think of it as a glade species, but the place where I first found it and where those are is right under a cedar tree, right out in there's big open, wide, gravelly cedar glades with one big cedar tree, and it's right under this cedar tree where we get a lot of them. That's the first ones I ever saw. And since then, they've kind of slowly spread after, I guess, the prescribed burns have definitely helped, but we're seeing more and more of the Western Wallflower there. Another April scene, that's a Rose verbena or Rose vervain. That's kind of at its peak bloom. That's kind of an off the beaten path spot there at Couchfield Cedar Glade. Really a nice smell when they're blooming, really a nice aroma, attracts a lot of butterflies. I see a lot of tiger swallowtails on these. That's the eastern white flowered, the beard tongue. That's the mid-April thing you'll see kind of out in the barrens. More so than the gravelly glades. I'd say these are more kind of the grassy glades out in the barren areas where we'll find this one. Small skullcap. Again, that's one that's not very rare, but it's a nice little, very tiny flower. It's a beautiful flower, but it's very tiny. It's hard to even see. You have to get down on the ground to get a good look at those kind of in the grassy areas surrounding the glades. We saw some sedum earlier coming up, and there's one, finally, we have one blooming. Let's get later in April. Got a clump of moss out there, the limestone. This is known as glade, some people call it glade stonecrop. I've heard like widow's cross. But the sedum, they really, when I first saw one of them, it doesn't, a lot of times you can see a flower and kind of have an idea. I bet that one really smells good. I never thought of this one as being aromatic, but I remember a few years ago, finally I was in a patch of them, a thick blooming patch, and I kept smelling this really sweet aroma. And I never realized till I got down there how it was the sedum that has this really fantastic smell. But if you ever if you've never smelled this particular plant in April, if you find some blooming, give them a smell. Because I don't, one of the best smelling plants I think we actually have in the glade. But for many years I went without even knowing that they smelled so good. That's the spot, I think, from the very first photo there, Couchfield Cedar Glade, where I was showing the 6 zones of the Cedar Glade. That's a little bit later, just showing some of, again, there's like a constant wave of flowers that bloom in that spot in those gravelly areas beside that limestone. I've always said if you find some bare limestone out in the glade, that's often that'll be a hot spot right beside there in those gravelly glades and those grassy glades. Uh, I think, I think most of that, I think there's some sedum in there, some glade sandwort, and I don't know what else is in there, but that's a scene from April, I believe, late April. There you got some more of the glade stone crop sedum, and that's some later, some more of the glade crest gone to seed. As you can see, it was green in the other photo, and there it's a little bit later, it's actually turning red. So some nice color even from the seed pods on the glade crest. Some of the shrubs, we're talking about the shrub zones of the cedar glades. And that's one sometimes you'll find along that edge. I see these along like a lot of the trails, along if you're walking on a cedar glade path, and again on the edge of the woods. This fragrant sumac or aromatic sumac, that's some of the little fruit on it. And again, a lot of people mistaken that when they first see it. The first instinct is poison ivy because it does have those three leaves, and does look a little bit similar. Oh, this is more of a kind of a woody shrub. Usually I find a little bit different habitat as well. But one of the many sumacs I see out in the glades, this is usually I see again at the edge of the woods, the fragrant sumac. That's one out kind of in the barrens. I think this spring at Couchville Cedar Glades, just in the grassy barrens. That's actually smooth sumac there. That's when it was flowering. That one really attracted tons and tons of bees. That was a lot of bees on these flowers. Bees are really enjoying the smooth sumac there. This one, as you notice, it has sort of longish kind of leaves with like little teeth, and that will differentiate it from the next one, which actually grows right beside it. That's the wing sumac, and in Couchville they actually grow right beside each other. I mean, they're right together. And if you look down along you can see the fruits there, but if you look down along where it gets its name, the wing sumac, you can see little like wing-like appendages, like the leaves. The wings go all the way down the little stems there. This is where it gets its name, wing sumac. It also has other common names. I think some people call it shining sumac because the leaves, they get really shiny. I've heard it even called dwarf sumac, but just one of the many sumacs we have there near and around the glades. This would be more really the barrens, the open barrens. This is a neat little flower I've always really loved, the western daisy. We have a lot of daisies around our area, and this one's not as common as the others. This is a nice little native. I find these usually on the edges of the glades. They're not out in the middle of the glades, but you can see there. I've been saying that a lot, the edges, but there are a lot of really unique species that are on the edges of those cedar glades. You got the ones that are out in the middle of the wide open. Then you can see they got the rocky there, and you got the woods behind there. So western daisy is one. We don't have a lot of in Middle Tennessee, but we have a nice little population. That's there also at Couchville Cedar Glade. Maroon Carolina milk vine, one of the climbing milk vines there, flowers. That's about sometime in May. Really beautiful little flowers. I got another photo of that later as it progresses. That's some more sedum. Again, I love spots like that. You got that bare limestone, and you got that break there, you got a little bit of soil there, and the flowers are loving it. There's like a constant wave. It blooms right there in that spot. That's in February and March. That's all glade crest right there. What you're seeing that's pretty much all glade crest. Cut to like a month or two later, it's all sedum and glade sandwort. So I love going to that spot because like every 2 or 3 weeks, it kind of changes. Downy woodman, again, that's not necessarily a glade species, but it's one there I find at the edges of the glades quite a bit. Narrow leaf vervain, that's a tiny little flower, diminutive. It's kind of whitish to violet. See there, kind of in the gravelly glades. Actually, that one blooms in April and May, and I'm still seeing some blooming actually right now. So it kind of has a long growing season. We talked about Gus and Gattinger earlier, and that's one of the many plants named after Gattinger. Gattinger's prairie clover. Another one of those, you see all that big bare limestone there, and it's right on the edge there, kind of where it turns into like the gravelly glades, kind of just hanging over there. That's middle of May, I would think, is when early to mid May is when they're kind of their peak. That's the Couchville glade there, Gattinger's prairie clover, and I think I got another photo, kind of this a closer look at the Gatinger prairie clover, just the flower there. Really beautiful flower, kind of subtle. It's not maybe not as bright and deep as some of the others, but really up close, it's really a beautiful flower. This is some people call it prairie larkspur, some glade people call it glade larkspur. It's out there kind of in the grassy glades. The scientific name is delphinium, which means dolphin-like. If you look at the buds, they look kind of like dolphins. That's where the name, definitely where you can see delphinium comes into play there with the buds. And I think I got a photo of the next one where it's all in full bloom, not the same plant, but another one. Yeah, there it is. That's where they're all. The glade larkspur. And these, I love when these are flowering because I go out and it's flat out there. And at that time of year, there's not many tall plants. And these kind of they're like little mini skyscrapers. When I'm walking out there, I'll just see these gigantic, they just really stand out. You'll have all these plants down here and just got some sporadic little skyscrapers there in the grassy glades. Probably, I don't know. I would say probably my favorite, the best smelling, best odor of any aroma of any plant there in the Cedar Glades. This is glazed savory. They're very small flowers that you probably can't tell from this photo, but they're tiny little flowers, but they're nice. But that's a plant I can be walking in January and February when they're not blooming. If you're near them, you just brush up against them, you'll get that aroma, that mint. That I love chewing on the leaves. I mean, it's like putting this. You talk about something refreshing. It's like spearmint gum, but better, and make a nice tea too. But that's a glazed savory, kind of in the grassy glades there. Again, you can see some rock there. So many of them are right on those borders. Like I said, the grassy glades and the rocky areas. I think those are you'll see them flowering usually in May. We talked about a little bit about trees earlier. Again, that maybe is not, some people wouldn't find that photo that exciting, but I admire any tree that can grow out in the middle of those rocky, gravelly cedar glades. And that's pretty much two of the only ones that can grow out there. That's the eastern red cedar, and right beside it on the right is the blue ash. And that's actually, I'm impressed how big actually cedar is, because there's not hardly any trees or even big plants out there. But that tree is actually pretty thick for eastern red cedar in that kind of habitat. But again, out there, right in the middle where those located, that's pretty much, at least at Longhorn, the only two I'll see will be the eastern red cedar and blue ash, and maybe a wing down. That's pretty much it for that kind of spot right there. And speaking of wing down, the Cal Cedar Glade, that's a wing down there. Again, it doesn't look that, not the most beautifully shaped tree, but it's a Cedar Glades. They do what they can out there. There's a lot of, I become enamored by them. Even some of them have like kind of awkward, kind of misshapen, but this is little wing down out there in the glades, doing the best it can. I like that. Again, I love blue ash. That's you see all the rocky terrain there, and just the blue ash growing right out in the middle of it. See some of the rose verbena back in the background. I lead a lot of tree ID hikes. I love trees, and people always ask, why is it called blue ash? What's blue about it? And the inner bark, if you place it in vinegar, it's formed like a blue dye. It has a blue dye. And even the sap itself, when it's exposed to the air, has like a bluish color to it. So that's where you get the blue. People always wonder, they look up, they don't see anything barkly, they just wonder why it's called blue ash. But my favorite thing about it is the stems, the branching. The scientific name of the blue ash is quadrangulata, which means four-sided. And sometimes if you can get close enough, a low branch, sometimes you can see the square stems. It's also called square stemmed ash. And it's really, and that also separates it from the other ashes around. Like at Longhorn, we have white ash and green ash. White ash, I usually find that in the woods, the richer soils. Green ash, I usually find that around the water. But the blue ash, that's sort of the Cedar Glade ash. That's the one you find out in kind of the rocky, kind of the poorer soils, sandy, rocky soils. But yeah, I'm a big admirer of that, again, because I see some like that grow like that large in that rocky terrain there. But going back to the Maroon Carolina milk vine, I showed one earlier. That's the big heart-shaped leaves. They kind of like climbing on other little shrubs. I showed earlier the evening primrose at Long Hunter, the triloba. This is the Missouri evening primrose. I actually took this at Flat Rock, Cedar Glade, and Barrens. This is much bigger. This is one's about 3 times bigger than the other one. It's hard to tell just looking at this photo, but when you see one of these, you won't mistake it for the other because these are huge. This is at Flat Rock. I think this is during May, but that's a very rare species. I think it's only in a few spots in Rutherford, maybe Wilson counties. I think it's federally listed, I guess, or state listed. I can't remember the Missouri evening primrose. It's at least it's a state listed. I think it could be federal listed, but I can't remember. But again, very rare species, but they are huge. You need to go out sometime to Flat Rock in May to see one of them. They're fantastic. And I think I took this photo actually on the same day in May. These are 2 species not at Long Hunter. This is the Missouri evening primrose. I had to go to Flat Rock, and this one I had to go to Cedars of Lebanon, the state natural area. This is the yellow sunny bells. We don't get these at Long Hunter. So there are a few, Couchville and Long Hunter has so many rare and unusual species, but we don't have everything. So I have to take a trip to Flat Rock and Cedars occasionally to see something else. This is in the lily family. They kind of like the wettish, I'd say the wettish areas, kind of a little bit kind of the wet glades. There's some flowers. You think of cedar glades, you think of like dry, rocky terrain, but there are some cedar glade species that kind of like the wet parts of the glades. And I see these more a little bit in the wet glades. The yellow sunny bell. Not really a glade species, but I just love this spot out in the middle of Couchville Cedar Glade. There's like this big open gravelly area, rocky, but there's like one chinkapin oak tree, and under it there's like its own little little climate habitat, something there, and there's Indian pink blooming under there, and there's some I think fragrant sumac. But I just love the fact that there's some Indian pink out in the middle of a cedar glade. It's not something you would normally see. This one almost looks like, when I show people that, it's something like from another planet. That's false Gromwell. It's one of the cedar glade species. It's blooming in May. Very unusual. That's actually the flower. I mean, that's in full bloom there. So you have to it's pretty tall and kind of gangly. You have to get down under that almost to take a photo but pretty interesting species because there's nothing else that looks quite like it. Green dragon, that's again, that's just kind of in the wet area of the glade. I see some of these. You can see kind of the yellow, they call it like the tongue of the dragon. Closely related to Jack in the Pulpit. You may be familiar with that species. This green dragon, they're closely related species. Very unusual flower there. Gattinger's lobelia, another one named after Gattinger there. More Gattinger's lobelia there with some other species. I think narrow leaf vervain and some others there in the glades. This was named after Elsie Quarterman. Quarterman's hedge is a species. As you can see, it's another one like kind of the wet glades. You see, actually, that one's actually in the water there. That's Couchville Cedar Glade. And I think that's sometime in May when those are blooming. Some Smalls ragwort there in April. That's another Smalls ragwort. That's actually Flat Rock there. I took that one, Smalls ragwort blooming there in the Barrens. Another one of the Maroon Carolina milk vine. You can see it's gone to seed there. It's also nicknamed spiny pod. As you can see the seed pod on the right. You see the flowers on the left and the seed pod on the right. Getting into May there, I think some of these May, that's the prickly pear, and I think I got one of the flower. Yeah, that was one of those days I just hit it perfect, just by accident. Usually don't get this plant, all blooming together like that. But that was there on the edge of the rock there at Couchville Cedar Glade when the prickly pear was blooming. Fantastic. Sometimes we take it for granted seeing so many prickly pears around there, but their flowers are really fantastic. There are a few flowers that are that spectacular. Limestone fame flower might be my favorite Cedar Glade plant. I just love those. Everything about them is unique. The color is so unique. The very thin thread-like stem it has. The succulent leaves. I think I got a couple of more of the limestone fame flower there. You can see the limestone in the background. And just look where it grows there. This is kind of later in May. You can see some of the dried up plants around. I think that sedum and the stone crop there is kind of dried up. Everything's kind of brown and gray. And then you got that limestone flame flower right in the middle of all that barren, all that they really do well in the heat because they defy the odds. They really bloom the hottest part of the day, the hottest time of the year. A lot of people have asked me, like, why can't I find them blooming? They go out, I think, in the morning to try to find them. You got to go in the afternoon. I would say from around 2:30 to about 4:30 is when I usually see them blooming. Anytime before or after, they'll be closed up usually. You got to get them in the right place. It's going to be where you find these, it's going to be very hot. It's going to be bare rock, limestone. Usually where you find the bare limestone, they're right beside there, right in those gravelly glades, right beside the bare limestone. But a spectacular little flower. Like I said, it just, to me, it just amazes me that it even can grow in those conditions. The famous Tennessee coneflower, that's a Couchville Cedar Glade. I think I got a couple more of that the same year. That's the Couchville Cedar Glade. I think all these were taken. There was one year that really was the most I'd ever seen. I think maybe it was 2013. And I think all these were taken in 2013. For whatever reason, we're still not sure why. It's just like kind of like the perfect storm. I don't know if it was the weather or the rain, maybe in the fall or spring before that, but they were the most I'd ever seen. Just an up close Tennessee coneflower. And that's that same year. You can see how thick they were. I don't think I've ever seen them quite that thick. That's their Couchville Cedar Glade. And again, all the plants, they have their own ways of surviving out there in the Cedar Glades coping. Like the Tennessee coneflower, they have like a long taproot that goes down to find cracks in the rock to get to water. And like I showed, the limestone faneflower had the succulent leaves. They store water in their leaves. So they all have their own way of surviving that kind of those brutal conditions out there. Cedar Glades, a frog, that's a green tree frog in 2010. We'd never seen a green tree frog anywhere along Hunter. One time, and I heard one out in the Cedar Glades, and actually went and found it after it called, and I got a photo of it. You can see it's an old photo because it's so tiny, but so yeah, plenty of frogs out there in the wet weather streams. A friend of mine actually took this photo there at Jones Mill, just trying to get show some different Cedar Glade areas along Hunter State Park. This is actually the Bryant Grove Trail, actually, one of the Cedar Glade habitat out there. And that's the Jones Mill Trail, also known as used to be called a mountain bike trail, some of the glades out there. That's back to Couchville. You can see kind of the wet weather stream. Usually has water in that stream in the winter and in the spring. Usually dried out in the summer. Some more of that geology. I was just fascinated by some of the rocks. That's a glade way out in the middle of Long Hunter State Park. It's way off the trail. Just some of that slab is hard to see from that, but it's a lot. It's almost like a basketball court size, just a big slab of just limestone with some big, huge cracks in the middle of it. You have to look close maybe to see if you look really close, you may see a bird in the middle of that photo. This is one of my favorite things about the Cedar Glades, some of the birds out there. We have the nightjar family, and 3 members of the nightjar family that nest out there in the glades is the common nighthawk and the chuck-will's widow and the whippoorwill. And that's a common nighthawk nesting there out in the middle of the gravelly glades. I mean, it nests on the ground there, right beside the Tennessee coneflowers. And I got a better shot where you a little bit closer. You see a little bit better there. You see the camouflage? It has those streaks of the white and the brown and the grays. It looks just like the rocks in the dirt. It's a perfect camouflage. And I find one nesting about once a year, and usually it's by accident. I'll be looking at a Tennessee coneflower and I'll actually spook one. It'll jump because I mean I would never see it otherwise. I'd almost have to step on it because they just look so. And they're always right beside so a good rock and right beside Tennessee coneflowers. A little bit closer, there's the common nighthawk there. You see Tennessee coneflower foliage there where it's nesting. I always find 2 eggs where they're nesting. Another nighthawk there in the Cedar Glades. And there's the eggs for the common nighthawk. And they're really not as big as they look there. They're very tiny. They're not much, a little bit bigger than a jelly bean, but they're very, and they blend right in. They look like a pebble. If you're out there, you would never see one. People wonder how they can nest on the ground, but there's not many predators really that come out in those hot Cedar Glades, to be honest. And plus they're so well camouflaged, I don't think anything would ever see it. But the only times I've seen them just by accident. That was the common nighthawk. There's a whippoorwill nesting there at Couchville Cedar Glades. Their habitat's slightly different, but they're very nearby. The common nighthawk is right there in the gravel and the gravelly glades. And right beside there, the first little bit of woods, the edge of the woods, that's where you'll find the chuck-will's widows nesting. They like the leaf litter. And they blend in perfectly. As you can see, they blend in perfectly with the leaf litter. they nest, they're like neighbors. You'll have the nighthawk nesting here and just a few hundred feet away, right inside the woods, you'll find the Chuck Will's widow. And I hear Chuck Will's widows more than any of the nightjars. They call constantly April, May, June at night. And then you'll see the egg here, a little bit different from the nighthawk. That's the Chuck Will's widow. That's that same bird. That's its eggs. They're in the leaf litter. And the other one was whippoorwill. I don't have a photo of the whippoorwill. I'm not seeing as many whippoorwills or hearing them much anymore at Couchville. I do hear them still like at Vesta and Flat Rock. But I think we're too close to like at Long Hunter, too close to too many populated areas. We've kind of like not quite the right habitat anymore for whippoorwills. That's just a friend of mine took that. Pam Hass took that picture. That's when I think of that, I just showed you the night birds of the Cedar Glades. I want to think of the songbirds. The two I think of is a prairie warbler. One of them is a prairie warbler. And there's your prairie warbler there. I hear them. When I hear my first prairie warbler, I always get excited every year. It's usually around April, when they're come to nest around the glades and the barrens. And the other one is the yellow-breasted chat. That's they're called the buffoon of the briar patch because they make so many unusual sounds. These birds, they're comical, the sounds they make. I've been on hikes and people have heard different sounds. They'll say, well, what bird is that? And they'll say, okay, well, what bird is that? And it'll be a bunch of different sounds, but it's all this same bird. They grunt, they squawk, they whistle, they tweet, and they make every sound under the moon. I think a lot of people probably mistake it for mockingbirds as well. But they nest out there in the glades and barrens, and you rarely ever see one. They're usually hidden behind all the thick brush. They call it night sometimes. They nest near my house. I'll go out at midnight and hear these just making one crazy sound after another. And it's just like, it's comical to hear a bird calling at midnight, making all these unusual sounds. So the yellow-breasted chat, that's the other bird I think when I think of the Cedar Glades as far as like songbirds. And I rarely see a turkey out in the Cedar Glades. The one day I was looking at the Tennessee coneflowers, had a couple of wild turkeys walking through there. Shagbark hickory, I see that sometimes on the edges of the Cedar Glades. That's a tree I see a lot at Long Hunter. I've seen a lot of things roosting underneath those big flakes of shaggy bark. I found butterflies, I found lizards, I found bats under there. Really unique tree. A lot of animals use that for shelter. Well, we saw, I think Richard, we saw this when we went on our hike, the Deems oak. We had an oak tree out there in this Capsule Cedar. I didn't know what it was for years. I knew it was some kind of weird white oak, but didn't know really what it was. Some botanist from Virginia, he ID'd it as a Deems oak. He was saying it was a hybrid of chinkapin oak and white oak. And then recently we've talked about Richard and some other people looked at it and I thought it might be more of a chinkapin oak and a bur oak. So, and even though I don't see any bur oaks there now, this is a pretty old tree. And so at one time there may have been bur oak there. I know it's not a common tree in our area, but Wilson County, I think, does have bur oak. So, but anyway, it's a very interesting tree. Like I said, as of now, they're still calling it Deems oak, but possibly a chinkapin oak hybrid and a bur oak. And I love that because that's just two of the most famous wildflowers of the Cedar Glades. I don't usually get them in the same shop blooming together. The Eastern prickly pear there and the Tennessee coneflower. I think I took that in June of this year, late June. Yeah, wild glade petunia. There again, this is getting later in the year, June, July. I think some of these photos. Always call this one the flower that's having a bad hair day. That's the wild bergamot. See those? That's one of the mints found in the woods, usually there on the edges of the glades. Golden St. John's wort. Some people call it shrubby St. John's wort. Another one there. Find kind of in the shrub zone of the Cedar Glades quite often. Beautiful flower. Kind of nothing else quite like that one. Tennessee coneflower gets a lot of attention, but this one's just as nice in its own way. The prairie coneflower, it's more of a, you think of that more of as a Midwestern species, really. But we do have some of that in Middle Tennessee. I think these are from June, the prairie coneflowers. They're also known as gray-headed coneflower, maybe another common name you've heard used. And that's just some more, the prairie coneflower. It's kind of a thick patch there. That's some of the most blooms I've ever seen. I think that's somewhere in Couchville, Cedar Glade. Some of the milkweeds, we have a lot of milkweeds at Couchville, Cedar Glade. In fact, I think at least 6 that I've just seen, and these, I think I have all 6 of them right here. This is the antelope horn milkweed, one of the first ones to bloom. Then we got the green milkweed, also known as, I guess some people call it the green comet milkweed. Now this one is unusual for me because I see it a lot way out there in the middle of the gravel. A lot of these milkweeds I find more maybe in the grassy glades on the edge of the woods. But look, you can see where that's at. That's out there in coneflower country, right out in the middle of the gravelly glades, the green comet milkweed. And I think the next photo is a little bit later, this same plant gone to seed. That's the green milkweed later in the year, the seed pod broken open. The butterfly weed, another one of the milkweeds with some great spangled fritillary butterflies there. Going back another Maroon Carolina milk vine, that's also known as spiny pod. That's a little bit later. You can see the big heart-shaped leaves, the spiny pods on it. That's the same plant. That's just the way it was situated. Usually they hang down. That's the spiny pod, the Maroon Carolina milk vine. That's after it's broken open. It's kind of, that one for some reason was laying like a hammock. I thought it was kind of unusual, but another of our climbing milk vines there, that's an angle pod. Very unusual. It's kind of like the flower, kind of green, almost like kind of a leafy, fleshy, like a little star-shaped flower. They bloom a little bit after the Maroon Carolina milk vines, but they also, they have the big heart-shaped leaves the same way. They climb the same way. They climb up other trees. And the next one, you can see this, the seed pod a bit. It's a little bit different from the spiny pod. You notice it doesn't have spikes on it like the spiny pod. The angle pod is smooth, has kind of a weird, kind of like little, I guess where it gets the name angle pod, a little bit kind of twisted, not straight. And then this one is the milkweed, is actually still blooming now. I saw some last week on a glade height. This is world milkweed. When I say world, WHORLED, world milkweed. The leaves around the stems, the way they're whorled, but that's by far the latest blooming of the milkweeds that we have there. But they're actually still blooming. And this is some of the things actually blooming now, just some slender heliotrope. Again, you see the gravelly areas. Most of these, so many of these are out in the gravelly glades. This was one of those rare spots where I could get a photo of the Tennessee coneflower and the prairie coneflower kind of together there. And another, I like this. This was not long ago. You kind of get the layers. You see the Tennessee coneflower in the front, and then there's a big layer of prairie coneflowers, and then behind that, another layer of Tennessee coneflowers. And it's rare. You got to get that light. It's about kind of maybe a week or so when that happens, and it's gone. But that was actually this year, I think, later in June. But to see two of those coneflowers, just the waves of them, just was really, really spectacular. Yellow flax, little flower blooming there. Some more Tennessee coneflowers. Little glade bluet. Got several bluets out there. This one's one of the later ones that blooms out kind of in the same habitat as Tennessee coneflower. They're in the gravelly glades. Also, I think they call them diamond flowers, some people, the common names. Prairie mimosa, that's kind of in the grassy glades there. Very unusual flowers. You can see the leaves look like a kind of mimosa tree. And there's the mimosa, the same plant gone to seed. You see the seed pods are very, very interesting looking. Slender Girardia, that's another one that's kind of still blooming right now out in the gravelly glades. I just took that one just recently. This Tennessee coneflower just happened to be a common buckeye butterfly. I rarely see one of them out there in the glades, but especially on the Tennessee coneflower. So it was nice to see a buckeye on a coneflower. And again, this is later in the year, the fame flowers are actually still blooming. I found them they bloomed in May, started in May, and we're almost in September, and they're actually still blooming. They actually bloom all the way through September. We don't have like I said, most glade plants bloom for a week or two, but Tennessee coneflower and limestone fameflower have a long blooming season, so you can enjoy them for a long time. The other St. John's wort, still some of them blooming now. This is actually round fruited St. John's wort. It's much smaller than the other one we saw. It's not a shrub, a small flower. We have a lot of that out in the kind of the gravelly glades. There it is with some more of that heliotrope. Yes. Round fruited St. John's wort is the common name of that one. Very rare species here. That's another federally listed species, leafy prairie clover. We have a little bit of that at Long Hunter. There's not a lot of that anywhere. That's a plant you won't find much of really anywhere. That's the reason it's like federally listed. Very somewhat similar to the Gattinger's prairie clover, close relative of that one. But again, very subtle, but I still I think it's a very beautiful plant. It doesn't have like a lot of, you see a lot of color, a lot of petals on it, but that's Another one that's flowering now, that's the gumweed, lance leaf gumweed. That's not a good plant. That's a small little picture there, but I like showing it the location. You see, again, it's out there right beside the bare limestone and the gravel. That one does really good. That one even does really good in droughts. I think that another, the lance leaf gumweed, the little bud, if you touch the bud, it feels like it feels like chewing gum. But when we've had some of our worst droughts, I've even seen when Tennessee coneflowers were like even struggling, the gumweed it was one of the, still looked good, even when everything else was struggling. So it tends to handle droughts and like heat really well. And that's blooming like right now in the glades. Slender Gara, that's a kind of a little tall, kind of gangly flower that's kind of flowering right now in the edges of more of the barrens, I'd say the grassy barrens and the gravelly glades. Rose pink, again, that's kind of in the grassy glades, grassy barrens, up close, really beautiful flower when you see one up close. Rose pink. That was I saw a coneflower recently. It was the only one I'd seen, only time I'd seen a mantis on a Tennessee coneflower. So I had to get a photo of that. That's some woodland sunflower there on the edges of the glades. Has real sandpapery leaves, really rough leaves. White crownbeard, that's blooming now. Really important plant for butterflies, especially monarchs. Monarchs in the late in the year when there's not many things flowering, the monarchs use that a lot before migration. The white crownbeard. It's also known as frostweed. And the next picture will show why it's also known as frostweed. If you find one of these on the first cold nights of the year, the first hard freeze, like November, December, if you go to the base of the plant by the ground, the water is forced out from the stem and it forms these incredible ice formations, frost flowers, a lot of people call them. Beautiful. You got to get out early though before the sun melts them. But if you know where the white crownbeard is, like I said, look for these in November, December on the first cold nights early in the morning. You get some fantastic photos. Some of the formations are just unbelievable. And that's another, there you can see the stems there near the ground where the water is forced out. Flowering spurge, that's one that's flowering now. Some lance leaf gumweed. The mist flower, blue mist flower is kind of in the wet kind of areas on the edges of the glades. It's flowering now. Wild nodding onion, we have a lot of that in the glades right now. You see that kind of in the gravelly and the grassy glades both. And getting a little bit, that's later, getting the fall, getting to some of the goldenrod. Some of the first color in the glades usually is those sumacs. That's I think that's winged sumac. They get red leaves very, very early in the season. And that's some of the goldenrod. I think that might be, I'm not sure which one, that may be Gray's goldenrod. We have several out there in the barrens. And in the fall, you start getting the prickly pear. You see the fruit on there getting ripe. People make prickly pear jelly, lots of things with that. Our native field thistle there, I think, I didn't even notice till earlier I looked at it again, there was a spider below. It's hard to see right below the flowers, the spider with a looks like it's called a skipper, kind of blending in there. But and again, getting some of the colors of the grasses later in the year, getting some of the juniper berries on the eastern red cedar. It's actually a type of cone there. That's really the little fruits, little berries. And the birds use those a lot in the winter when there's not much food available. That's after a burn, one of the prescribed burns. Again, they do that I try to do it like every 3 years, at least I think at Couchville. But again, I always look forward to when they burn, because not only does it help keep a lot of the invasives, get rid of a lot of the invasives and keeps the cedar trees back, but it really rejuvenates a lot of these plants that you'll find in the grassy barrens and around the glades. Usually the year after a burn is always usually a spectacular blooming year. So I love to see when they come out and do the prescribed burns. I had to throw I think my only comment for this one was like, you never know what you'll find in the glades. I've walked in some really remote glades. And again, it goes back to, like I said, used to be dumps. You'll find all kind of interesting things back there. This one was kind of a little bit creepy. So I just kind of left that alone and moved on when I saw that. I took this actually just a couple of weeks ago on the edge of a cedar glade there. Our story trail, we have a little 1/4 mile story trail, and it has a neat little cedar glade there. And right on the edge of the glade, there was 2 little hop trees. And I thought, hop trees, that's the host plant of the giant swallowtail. So I started looking. I found about 20 caterpillars of the giant swallowtail, and they look just like bird droppings. They have the best defense of any caterpillar I've ever seen, because what bird is going to go after that? Their caterpillars are like bird droppings. And it's amazing that can become this big, beautiful giant swallowtail. If you've ever seen it, you're kind of like, what, really? That comes from that? But yeah, most every phase of the caterpillar though kind of looks like a different kind of bird dropping pretty much. And that's sort of the later phase. That was a pretty big one there. That was a really big caterpillar. But even the small ones look like bird droppings as well. But that's called a common hop tree. We don't have many of them around Long Hunter, but I was glad I found a couple that I thought might still be there from years ago, and found about 20 caterpillars. Again, getting late in the year. Some people have commented on that in Couchville Glade. They've commented on some of our evening hikes, sunset hikes, kind of looks like the Serengeti, like Africa, because they were actually say they expect maybe to see like a lion sitting up in that tree down there, just some of the sunsets, the glades there in that same little area there. If you've never been on a night hike in a Cedar Glade, I highly recommend it. I've been doing a lot of those this summer, and I really enjoyed it. Richard asked me to tell about what I've been doing. I forgot to do that, but I've been the seasonal interpreter at Long Hunter for the last, pretty much all summer and into the fall. And I've done a lot of night hikes in the Cedar Glades. I've done night hikes in other parts of the park forever, but I've not done a lot of night hikes in Cedar Glades, but it's been fantastic. It's like a whole different world out there. We've seen bats. One night we were sitting there looking at the wet weather stream, and I was with a flashlight, and a bat came up and just started going back and forth with my flashlight. We were hearing like common nighthawks were coming down, like diving. They come down in the evening. They're out looking for insects and moths flying around, the common nighthawks. But they have a territorial dive they'll do, and they'll come down and dive. And their wings, when they get down and they turn up, where their wings make this big booming sound. And I'll have people out there, and when they dive toward behind us, and I've had people actually scream like they didn't know what that was. And we've been seeing a lot of the nighthawks following us around and doing the dives and the bats. And the other day we had the Chokeweel's widows have stopped calling, but we had one while I had my flashlight looking at the bat. It came flying over and went down in the woods, and it had their eyes like glow orange when you have the light on them. You've probably seen them by car light before. So it was like almost like a Halloween hike, because we were seeing all these, the night jars were diving, nighthawks diving at it, and the orange glowing eyes, bats were flowing around. And Katie, of course, katydids and all the night critters, the insects. We're seeing all kind of like millipedes, some great spider webs. But the Cedar Glades are fantastic, and I would highly recommend a night hike if you've ever done one. I try to do one every week or two, but it's a different world out there.
Jason, do you remember the night jar that landed right in front of us on the trail?
Oh, yes. I definitely do. I'd never seen that before. We were doing a night hike. Well, it was a sunset hike, but it was just about to get dark. It was dusk, I guess. And the nighthawks had been, I think these nighthawks were glad to have us out there, because they were kind of following us the whole hike. They were just kept appearing over our group. They followed, looking around. They were flying around. They would dive occasionally, but all of a sudden we actually saw it coming behind us, and it dove down behind us, and it landed in the middle of the trail at Couchville Cedar Glade. And I'd never seen one land in front of the group, and it just landed there sideways and just started looking at us. It's a nighthawk, and I'd never seen that. I've been around, night jars for many years, watching them, studying them, but I'd never seen one. And it didn't seem scared of us. We were still walking toward it. I think Brian actually got a photo of it. Actually, as we were walking toward it, it just kept looking at us, and finally it flew off. But yeah, the glades are spectacular. Again, in the daytime, see all the wildflowers, the other things, but there's some great sunsets there. Great views of the night sky. We've had some great full moon hikes there, a super moon hike one time, but at night, it's pretty spectacular, just some of the sounds and sights you'll see. It's a different world out there. And that is from about 2 weeks ago. I had never, in all the years I've been at Couchville Cedar Glade, I had never seen one of the giant silk moths out there. I've seen a lot of them at Long Hunter State Park, but never at Couchville Glade. So this one night, I had my flashlight. We were looking at spider webs and stuff, and all of a sudden, something flutters behind me, and we all stopped and paused, and I got my light, and it was a big a polyphemus moth. And we got a great view of this polyphemus moth. I'd never seen one out there, even though I know they're around, but we saw one, and we thought, wow, I've never seen that before. That's impressive. 5 minutes later, something else comes fluttering down. It's a Luna moth. I'd never seen a Luna moth out there, and it actually landed in a little hickory tree beside us and posed for us, and I got a photo of it. So the nights are, again, the night hikes are pretty spectacular out in the glades. that was I took that actually in October of all things, right before Halloween, sunset, the spiders. And I still don't know what that spider was hanging from because there was no tree up there. So I was just, one of the things in the Cedar Glades, they, in recent years has become a big thing. One of our rare salamanders, the stream-side salamanders, they love these limestone habitats, these wet weather streams. They have to get in there in a hurry though, early in the year before they dry out. So you'll see they're like later larvae like in December and January. I think I took this like in January. That's the stream-side salamander there in a wet weather stream in the glades. And there's one, I think a little up, closer look at one of the stream-side salamanders. And I think the next one, maybe one of the adult stream-side salamander, but considered a rare species. And that's kind of become like our Cedar Glade salamander. They bring a lot of school groups and out there like that are studying the stream-side salamanders, done a lot of good work to help protect them. And but yeah, that's one of the newer things in recent years. I think we had seen them before. I think I saw them 20 years ago. We didn't know what they were, and all of a sudden, now we know them as a stream-side salamander, a rare species. And we're getting toward the end here. This is the wet weather stream. You just saw where the stream-side salamanders are. If any of you have ever been to Catskill Glade, but there's probably other glades that are very similar. This wet weather stream, it dries up in the summer, but in the winter and in the spring, the water goes down to the woods. It kind of goes way down into the woods. And this is kind of at Couchville where it ends up. There's this, again, that karst topography, all that really interesting rock formations, and it just disappears down to a big sinkhole. And you can see that's kind of where that wet weather stream goes at Couchville Cedar Glade. Just had a couple of photos. Again, this is some good karst topography. When I say that word, karst topography, that's just a kind of a habitat characterized by like a lot of limestone, a lot of like sinkholes, caves, kind of the rocky jumbles, that soluble rock there. That's what that is. We have a lot of that there. You can see some of the holes in the rocks. Again, that's that same spot, kind of where that wet weather stream disappears there at Couchville. That's probably the only waterfall. That's all, people's always said we don't have waterfalls along Hunter, and I said, well, yeah, we have one waterfall there. People don't know about it. It's kind of like, especially after heavy rain, it actually gets pretty loud there. So I've named that Couchville Falls. Nobody else knows it at Couchville Falls. I just call it Couchville Falls. And there's Couchville Falls. There's where it disappears. That next layer just disappears down to that big sink there. And that's kind of, I think there, yeah, that's the big sink that lasts the end of Couchville Falls. Again, later in the year, again, get some nice color there. There's one gangly wing down. But again, most people wouldn't. I just love some of these misshapen trees, but that's a wing down I always admire, just because I wonder how it's even growing out there. Last November, I decided to walk one day. You don't, when you think of Cedar Glades, you think of plants, you don't think of trees. So I decided one day, I'm going to walk around November. I'm going to see how many different kind of leaves I can find on the ground. And then I brought them all and put them on the limestone. So I'm going to take a photo. Here's some of the trees of a Cedar Glade. And let's see. Let's see. I was going to try to point them out. We got a blue ash there. We got a Carolina buckthorn. That's actually the glade privet. That's a northern red oak. Eastern hop hornbeam. We got a chinkapin oak. We got a rusty blackhaw there. We got a red hickory. We got sugar maple. We got a pignut hickory. We got a winged elm. That's the Deems oak there. I think we got a black oak. We got a black cherry. You got an American sycamore, you got a post oak, shagbark hickory, and a hackberry and an eastern redbud. So that's that day. I remember that's just the leaves I found on that particular day. I just wanted to see the trees don't get much respect out in the glades because it's usually all about the wildflowers. So, and I think that's the last photo. That was from the big year 2013. That's just, again, that's the most Tennessee clone flowers I'd ever seen. This year was a really good year too. This was probably the second best year that I've seen it since then, or the best year since then. But again, that was kind of just the perfect storm. So that's the end of my rambling, Richard.
Is this on? Good. Jason, that was an amazing presentation, product of many, many tens of thousands of hours being in the Cedar Glades to pick up that much information. So thank you very much. I know it's late, partly me because I got late start with the technology. When you have to leave, that's fine, but let's try to get a couple of questions in. And Paul, if something's shown up in the chat, you can be within.
Somebody asked if you ever seen a white, an Indian pink and white. Oh, here it is. You ever seen an Indian pink in white? She has a friend who has some and finds them really incredible.
A white color, what do you mean?
White colored Indian pink. I guess I don't know what you.
I
call
don't
it.
think I have. Have
I
any
don't-
of
I
you,
don't
have you ever seen? I don't think I've seen a white one. It's funny, some of those glazed species we just showed, there are a few that every once in a while I'll see a white, like I've seen a white Nashville breadroot before. I see maybe about one a year, I'll find a white Nashville breadroot. But yeah, every once in a while I'll see an unusual color, but I don't think I've seen a white Indian pink, no. Yeah. Yeah, I think pretty much all of them are. I mean, we hear more about, I guess, probably just the white ash because it's just a much more common tree, especially in our area. Most of all the woods, the ashes we have in the woods are the white ash. And green ash, again, like I said, more of a species you see around water, and then blue ash out in the glades. I've not really seen, at least at Law Hunter and Couchville, I'm not seeing a lot of evidence so far. I don't know, Leslie Ann, what you've seen, but I've not seen, I know we're just now starting to decide. We're actually been marking some of the trees, trying to decide what to do along the trail to some of the ashes. But yeah, I think, I think they're all susceptible. I think blue ash as well. But the thing is, blue ash is a little bit more, again, remote out in those glades. There's not as much of it out there. So, but I think, yeah, I think it's all affected.
So we're not sure how the blue ash will do here in Tennessee, but farther north, it is showing a little less susceptibility to death by the emerald ash borer. The white and green ash are evolutionary twins. The blue ash is a very distant cousin to the white and green ash here. And so it's different genetics. And so for that reason, it may work out even down south to be less susceptible than the white and green ash. Another question? So what is it about the blue ash that it likes the cedar glades so much more than, say, the green ash or the white ash?
I'm still trying to figure that out myself because, like I said, a lot of species of different trees, they tend to overlap a lot. And some of them species, sometimes white ash and green ash do overlap as far as the habitats. But yeah, blue ash, I mean, I rarely ever see it in any other habitat other than these kind of the rocky, kind of the cedar glades. And that's why I've always been kind of drawn to it because it just seems like it's out of place, especially considering where the other ashes, where you'll find that habitat. But yeah, I mean, some of the ones I see at Couchville, they're just coming right out of the rock, and it just fascinates me.
Yeah, here in the Central Basin, not the cedar glades, the white and green are much more common than the blue.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you go to the glades, and that's where you find the blues. But anyway,
Yeah.
if you figure that out, let me know because I'm dying to figure out why that is.
Yeah, same with me. Me too.
Other questions? Pumpkin ash? There's less information about that because it doesn't occur much up north as far as I know where the EAB has been. And we don't have it much, if at all, here in the Central Basin. It's more, I think, Memphis. So I don't have any information on the pumpkin. So why don't we cross our fingers and hope it's totally immune? So. Yes.
I've heard mixed things on that. You mean like you'll find like it just going to your basic plant store to find like if some of like market it's like Tennessee coneflower. I'm not. What's the other? There's another name. Was it Rocky Top? What's the one? I'm trying
Rocky
to think
Top
of
is
what they call. But I don't know if it's. Again, I mean, I'm sure the ones that like it, when Cedar's 11 have their plant sales, that we know those are, but as far as the plant, I guess it depends on the plant store. To be honest. I don't know, who knows what they're calling them or what they're marketing them as, but so that's a good question. I guess it just depends. I don't know. I can't say all, or yes, that's the same Tennessee coneflower, or no, that's a different thing, but Richard?
I was thinking that Rocky Top was a patented cultivar of Tennesseeansis.
Yeah.
But the thing that we need to worry about is that these coneflowers can hybridize.
Yeah.
And if the hybrid is sterile, no problem. But if you roll the dice enough times, you're going to find some hybrid that's not sterile. It will then back cross with one of the original species. And then you have to worry about, are the genes going to stay stable? A lot of times when hybrids can back cross, you get a type of hybridization which favors one or the other of the parental species. And so I always advise people to just keep one kind of coneflower in your garden. If it's Tennesseeensis, that's fine, but I don't like introducing Tennesseeensis because it's still a fragile flower, even though it's off the endangered species list. So if you want to mix two different other coneflowers, knock yourself out, but keep the Tennesseeensis out of there. So that's my personal opinion. I can't back that up with studies that show that this is a real danger, but it's sometimes, like with the Oriental bittersweet and American bittersweet, that hybridization favors the non-native plant. And so where their ranges overlap, it's been shown that the hybrids, as they back cross more and more, they all become more like the Oriental bittersweet. And so that's an example where it's known and documented where hybridization can lead to trouble favoring the introduced species. Because we don't want that.
April Moore just chimed in saying that she was given a Tennessee coneflower and was told at the same time that she could not grow any other kind of coneflower alongside of it for that very problem with the hybridization. She also wondered if there's some way of using blue ash in some sort of genetic combination to try, and if it is less susceptible, is there some way perhaps to use some of the genes from the blue ash to inoculate some of the other trees to or create another hybrid that would be less susceptible to the emerald ash borer?
Yeah,
I don't know if anybody's working on that, or
I think the best hope is the Lingering Ash Project, where they find ashes that did survive, say in the Detroit area or anyway, in Ohio. And then they take those surviving species and then cross them with other surviving species to try to get a white ash and green ash that are a little bit susceptible. I don't know what the status of that particular project is, but I know people have been working on that. Well, let's thank Jason again for that amazing presentation. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll do this again next month.